YouTube. Today I'm in Job 1, 2, 3, 4. I would ask that you read through Job, read along before me, ahead of me, so that you can get the most out of this short Devo, which is only a small glimpse of daily Bible reading. But I'm just your encourager. I'm your spark plug to get into God's Word. Job was probably around the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't know that for sure. We don't know exactly the area that he was in. We know that he was rioted and raided by the Chaldeans, so we know it was in that general vicinity. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He had great wealth. He was the richest guy in the area. He feared God and he stayed away from evil. We know he wasn't in the line of Abraham, but he did offer sacrifices, so he was a man of faith, and faith is the key to all of us. Ephesians tells us that we are saved by grace, meaning God's good, by faith. That's our activator. It is not of good works. It's a gift. It's not of good works so that nobody can boast about it. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had tons of sheep and cattle and camels and donkeys, stuff like that. Very, very wealthy man. His children would get together and party every so often. They would take turns at each other's houses. They were having feast. The next day, Job would always offer sacrifices, saying in verse 5, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Well, one day the heavenly courts come together, and Satan comes along with them, and God says to Satan, "What have you been doing?" He says, "I've been patrolling the entire earth to see what's going on, its comings and goings." And God says, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He's the finest in all the earth. He stays away from evil. He's blameless. He's a man of integrity." Satan says, "Yes, but you've always protected him. You had a wall of protection around him. He's rich. Take away everything he has, and he'll curse you." God says, "All right, test him, but don't hurt him physically." Sons and daughters are having another party. They're having a feast. A messenger comes to Job during this time and says, "The Sabians have raided and stolen your oxen and donkey as they were plowing. They killed all the farmhands, and I am alone. I alone escaped to come here and tell you." As he was still speaking, another guy comes up and says, "The fire of God has come down on your sheep and shepherds, and I was alone. I alone escaped. I was the last one left." As he's speaking, another guy comes up and says, "All your camels and servants have been killed. They've been raided by the Chaldeans, and I alone escaped." And as he's still speaking, the fourth guy comes up and says, "The wind swept from the wilderness and came and hit all 4 sides of the house that your kids were in and partying in, and it fell on all sides and it crushed it. I alone escaped." Job stood up. Catch this. He stood up, tore his clothes, shaved his head, fell on the ground, and he worshiped. He worshiped during all this tragedy that he was faced with. Verse 22, the end of chapter 1 says, "In all Job did, he did not sin by blaming God." Chapter 2, the heavenly courts come together again. Satan joins them once again. God says, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" "I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on," Satan responds. "Have you noticed my servant Job? He's blameless. He fears. He stays away from evil. He maintained his integrity even though you urged me to harm him without cause." And Satan responds, "Skin for skin. Take away his health, and he'll curse you right to your face." God agrees. "All right, do as you please, but spare his life." So Job is left cursed by Satan to have these terrible boils all over his skin from his head to his toe. He uses a broken pot to scrape his skin. He sits there in ashes, maybe to soothe his wounds. His wife says, "Just curse God and die." 2 verse 10 says, "You talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad?" That's what he's saying to his wife. Then his 3 buddies show up, and they show up to comfort. And don't you just love this? They come up wailing, throwing dust. They sat on the ground for 7 days and said nothing. People like in the hospital, you're hurting, or whatever's going on in your life, you're suffering, and people make a big spectacle about the woo, the wailing, and it just really makes things worse. Other than just to tell somebody, hey, I love you, I'm praying for you. Or silence. Presence is oftentimes better than presence. So just being there for someone is better than anything you could say or give to someone who's suffering. But these friends, they're human. They have false accusations and assumptions of why Job is going through these things. And in verse 3, we see where Job is cursing the day that he dies. The day that he was born. He says things like, couldn't have been born dead, which is gruesome. Or, I curse the day for failing to shut my mother's womb. Like it would be better off if I died. Now, Paul says something beautiful that's kind of contrary to this in Philippians. He tells the people of Philippi, he says, to live is for Christ and to die is to gain. So, hey, if I'm living, if I'm put here on earth, I'm going to live for Jesus. And if I die, if I get to go to heaven, even better. But in physical sufferings, in a fallen world that we live in, people that are suffering physically with hurts, either emotionally or physical pains, we can't oftentimes see the depth of how much they are spent physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. So oftentimes, again, that just the presence, your presence of being there is far more helpful than any words that you can say of comfort, because you can't be in their shoes. So just being there saying, I love you, I'm praying for you, is there anything that I can do? Or one of his buddies has to get up and speak. Remember, presence versus presence. He should have just stayed there and been with his friend. But instead, he speaks up. He makes assumptions. And I want to read to you verse 7 says, stop and think. Do the innocent die? When have the upright been destroyed? My experience shows that those who plant trouble and cultivate evil will harvest the same. Now, other religions, you see a true direct relationship between good and evil. The scales and the balances, oftentimes. The amount of good you do is the amount of good you receive, and the amount of bad you do is the amount of bad you receive. That's the way other religions work. Christianity, that's not always the case. Oftentimes, and Jesus does speak of what you reap is what you sow, those types of things, and oftentimes that is correct, but not entirely. Bad things happen to good people. And good happens to bad. You've heard it said that a non-believer, this is on earth, is the closest they'll ever get to experiencing heaven. And for the believer here on earth, the sufferings and the things that they go to, that's the closest they'll ever get to experiencing hell. I encourage you to become a daily Bible reader. Read ahead in Job. Get ahead of me so that when you watch this, we can be together and maybe we can glean something from one another. Be in God's Word. Be in Proverbs or the Psalms or the Gospels. Just get some of God's Word in you every day. Pray for me that I continue to do this with consistency, with pure motives. I pray if this was a blessing to you that you would like, subscribe to this channel, and share with others. God bless you.